Good morning, Dave. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Amy. Good morning to you as well. It's been a good morning so far. Yeah.
What have you been up to?
Uh, Up early-ish, but a very good night's sleep. I haven't been sleeping very well on recent days, but I had a very good night's sleep, which I'm very happy about. So feeling good this morning. Morning prayer, which was full of tangents, but good ones, including praying for our elders in our society. So yeah, good solid start to the morning. Yourself?
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, had a started off the day with morning prayer as well. Lots of stuff. I even quoted you in morning prayer this morning, Dave. So shout out to you talking about your short summary of how you summarize what we do as clergy. Just pointing people to Jesus and really setting a challenge, I guess, of whatever we do as followers of Jesus. Would that be our mission in our day, in our conversations, in the way that we conduct ourselves, in the people that we look to seek to serve as we serve God and serving others? Would we be people that simply point people to Jesus? So I gave you credit, I gave you reference, gave you a proper shout out, but yeah, drop in all my theologian buddies into the conversation. You like to talk about your mate Stephen and your mate this, so I talked about my mate Dave today. So all good. Dave, we are going to, in a minute or two, talk about Archbishop Stephen Cotterill's book, Dear England. But before we jump into the book, we always start with a question around what is something that has made you smile this week, or where have you seen God at work around you? So I wonder, where do you want to kick off with?
I may be crossing over on something that's made you smile, but
All
I'm
right.
gonna do it anyway. Two things really. Last night we had a service admitting our church wardens, and it was obviously a much smaller service than we normally have, but actually there was something in that service that actually says no, this was great. Most people turned up, which was really good to see people there, and really just to see that the commitment, the continued commitment of people within our church to fulfil that role, of that ancient role, as I said yesterday, 13th century of church warden. And what made me smile is actually reading up a bit about some of what the role, the history of the church warden is, particularly the current law that's still in there, where you can arrest violent, riotous, indecent behaviour in a churchyard while a service is going on, because you're interrupting the priest. So that made me laugh a bit, and dare I say, the football. Yesterday, the media are calling it Magic Monday. If you remember the Olympics, it was Super Saturday. Yesterday was Magic Monday with two stonking games, and really, and we watched the second half of one of them together, which was fantastic, and then I came home and watched the highlights, as you do. So I think it's been a hit and miss so far, the tournament, but actually I think it's come alive now. So that's He's God at work in that. God's at work everywhere. So I can't really pick anything out. Maybe the French being beaten. I don't know.
Wow. It was funny last night. We had, obviously, as you were saying, the Archdeacon's visitation. I sent you a rather cheeky text about an hour before saying, I have an awful feeling, I'm suddenly feeling unwell, as Spain and Croatia went to injury time. But I made it in time to the service, and I did say to you, if the service runs on time, it might be just perfect timing for the second half if you could put the screen on at Ascension afterwards. And it was good to watch. It was good fun. And I think, as you're saying, there's something about just the joy of being able to watch football with people. And even I would even go as far as saying, even if you don't like football, you would have enjoyed yesterday, because there was so much drama and there were so many goals, which is quite often what people say to me if they don't like football. It's so boring. There were 14 goals yesterday and a bunch of penalties. Just high-end drama in that. But since you've talked about that, I'll chuck in a different story. On Saturday, I went to a friend of mine's priesting. And it's something that makes you smile. You see people kind of discerning a call perhaps to ordination, and then going through the process, and it's just wonderful to be there, as my friend Dave, made the promises. They're huge promises you make when you're priested, and just to pray for him as part of the service. And there's always that thing where it kind of throws you back to your own. Today's actually the 2nd anniversary of my priesting, so that's kind of interesting. So kind of just looking back 3 years since deaconing, but 2 years since priesting today, and the journey that God brings you on into that point. And then I remember 2 years ago, I'd been filling in some of the application form for St. Luke's and wondering what that meant alongside getting ready on my priesting ordination. And just how God works through the most incredible kind of set of circumstances. Last week we were also at a meeting together, and I noticed on Facebook, in the memory section where it comes up, 3 years since such and such, and it had been 3 years since I'd left St. Luke's as the youth worker, and just this kind of strange thing of that kind of reflecting on, I feel I need to leave St. Luke's for a while, but it didn't feel at the end of the journey. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't foresee ever coming back as vicar, but, being in the next door church and still caring deeply for the people of St. Luke's whilst learning with you at Ascension. And it's just crazy how God works things out. We just have to be obedient to what he says. It felt crazy in some level to leave St. Luke's for curacy. But when we trust and are obedient to what God says, he works all things out anyway, and twists and turns along the way. So yeah, that's a bit of a ramble, but something about being at someone's priesting, just wonderful to see someone stepping out in obedience to that, but then also the natural reflection that happens around where God has led and been at work in our own journeys. Definitely moments to reflect and to smile. Huge part of our, I guess, ordination stories, my ordination story, is Bishop Stephen, and he was our diocesan bishop at the time, now Archbishop of York. But we've been reading his book, Dear England, for the last few weeks together. We're at the final chapters this afternoon, this morning, looking at this section on changing the world. We started unpacking it last week, Dave, but what jumped out for you this week?
No, I think Archbishop Stephen opens up with talking about the NHS, particularly through COVID. And, he opens up with the idea that we, for a while, every Thursday at 8 o'clock, we would stand on our doorstep and clap the NHS, but also more broadly, the support workers, delivery drivers, all those people that continued through it to ensure that we could actually sort of continue to live as best we can. And in an extension of that, he said, he put the idea of the Nightingale Hospital, and the idea that from I think the 21st, 22nd of March, there was a meeting, and then literally early April, the hospital was there. And it just shows you the will of the people to actually to put some. If the will is there, and if the love is there, and if the compassion is there, we can do it. And he sort of compared it with maybe a society that's lost some of that actually has, dare I say, I am at the centre of the universe. It's all about me and my family, and that's who I'm looking after. And it's sort of summarising some of the things that we talked about living for the common good, living for community, and reminding us that we are called into a community of people. We're not here to live for ourselves. And dare I say, some of the rhetoric from political establishment, from governments in previous years, has actually suggested that no, you do live for yourself. Margaret Thatcher, whether it was a misquote or whatever, or what it was taken out of context, there's no such thing as society, that sort of thing. And so the idea of leading us to think that it's all about us, whereas actually it's all about everyone else. And I think, and dare I say, it was quite he talks about the Second World War, and talk about actually the positive things that came out of the people coming together for a common good. However, not to hold on to this, and we continue to bring it out about dare I say, defeating enemies and that sort of rhetoric. Whereas actually the positive thing that came out of it is actually people coming together to rebuild communities from that. So I think that was the first thing that came out of me, is actually this idea that we are here for community. We're here to live in community. We're here for each other. We're here to dare I say, as the early church did, to have things in common, rather than the idea of this self-love. It's love for one another. So that's the first thing. And he's summarising, really, I think these 3 chapters are summarising much of what he said already. He's bringing it all together. So that's the first thing I got out of that. What about you, Amy?
Yeah, and then I guess what he goes next to the conversation is that he talks about this kind of root, this old word shalom, not just meaning hello or nice to see you, but not just a kind of fuzzy idea of peace, but actually the pronouncement of shalom being about someone's whole well-being. And he makes this point actually that in the, shalom in the Hebrew, but is a reference back to the Greek word of sozo, and actually sozo, while it means salvation, also means kind of health, and this idea that God cares about our whole being, mind, body, and spirit. There's a wholeness in the care that God gives to us, and Archbishop Stephen really kind of teases this out, when Jesus says in John 3:17 that God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. The word saved through him could just as accurately be translated as have health through him. And this idea that God cares, yes, for our physical being, he cares for our mental well-being and our spiritual well-being. And it's all drawn together: wholeness, shalom, salvation.
Yeah.
And actually, if we are to rebuild this nation, if we are to work for the common good, we need to take seriously the whole of people's being, not just physical health, but spiritual health, not just looking after one part of this compartmentalized version of viewing ourselves, but what does it mean to really say and believe that God cares deeply about all aspects of our being. And we kind of tease that out a lot in our preaching, Dave. I know you do as well, but God doesn't just care about your Sunday best. He cares about all the rest of the week. It's not just about the big things, but God cares about the small things. What are your fears? What are your insecurities? What are the reasons that keep you awake at night? God cares for your whole being.
Yeah.
He's the only one perhaps that does. So how do you bring your whole self to him and trust your whole self to him, I guess?
Yeah, no, it's great. And I love the bit about in this first part of the chapter, or near the end of the first chapter, where he talks about, again, I'm bringing the NHS as an example, the idea of, it was first coined by a Tory, actually, but in the early 40s, he said the welfare state.
Yeah.
But it's the idea of, actually, if we see NHS as a model of, that there are no barriers to getting a good health service, it's free at the point of entry. How can we replicate that throughout the rest of society? The idea of actually everyone, as you say, has the ability to be made whole, to be, dare I say, made well, not just through the NHS, but in all parts of society. How could we ever get to that? And that's a question. So Archbishop Stephen is talked about what's called a new patriotism. The idea is actually the health and well-being of everyone, and not just through the NHS, but everywhere. And I suppose he says here, pulling together, teamwork, collaboration. This is what's best, is to be human, and they reflect the very being of God. And then he goes on, and therefore the best of British. So I think what he's hoping for is and this is addressed to England. Yeah. So he's hoping for a new Englishness, where barriers are cut down, where there's less opposition, and we're more coming together for the common good. That word again, but it can only happen through Christ, who is the one who unifies, the one who brings unity. Dare I say, under the bond of peace. But you and I know that this is a high ideal, but something we should aspire to. So it's I
think it's really interesting because he starts to get a little bit political in the sense of he starts talking about some of the need for new ideas to address emerging problems that we have known about for a long time, but actually that he starts to argue we need new solutions. So whether that be, he mentions briefly climate change, he mentions getting rid of Trident. He's quite political at that point, but actually what does it say about us as a society, about where we choose collectively, where our government, where our financial priorities are, why. And he talks about the money waste on Trident. He speaks about climate change. He speaks about a universal basic income. He speaks about, yes, the need to pour money into the NHS, but actually how do we have a wider lens on what it means to do things differently. And he puts forward kind of 3 ideas, he thinks, that need to be reorientated in order to bring us back together. And, you know, interesting now, the Archbishop of York calling for a louder voice for different regions in the UK, that we wouldn't be London-centric. Some challenging ideas for me as a Scot and what that looks like in an argument for a stronger voice for York, but as part of a united kingdom. And, you know, conversations around how do we have good representation, how do we hear from other parts of both England, but also of what it means to be the United Kingdom, and having stronger models of devolution and hearing more, and, you know, how are our decisions made? And, you know, these are big, we're not going to get, it's not a political conversation, and I know that I have quite different views from you on that, and that's great. There's something about how do we have unity despite different political opinions, which is an important thing, and where the church, I think, needs to model better. Actually, how can we think different things but love each other and hear the best answers and not just shut down the conversation? But he speaks about the need for new ideas and new conversations and new, how do we have a fresh conversation about how do we hear, how are decisions made, how do we spend money, and what are the cares if we are to build back together around a common good. I don't know, do you want to unpack any of that, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, he said briefly climate change. That was quite a big briefly. He was very clear on dare I say, if we have ignored, this is the thing, you're right, we've ignored large part of the society has ignored climate change and saying it's fine, we can carry on the way we live, it's going to be okay. And he said, no, it isn't. And you know, we can see it with a change in the way nature is working or not working. And so there was a call to a, dare I say, a change. We have to change the way we live. Now, COVID has forced us to do that, and he's actually said that actually, you know, our nature has actually had a bit of a breather through COVID. You know, we're not travelling as much. We're not flying planes here, there, and everywhere. And so actually there is a bit of a recovery there. And so COVID has shown us that this change of the way of life has a positive effect on nature, on our environment. So what does that mean? Because come 19th of July in England, many people are now itching to get back to the way things were.
Yeah.
And the hope is that we don't do that. The hope is that this last 18 months has shown us that there is another way to live.
Yeah.
I preached on Sunday about what I would call divine delays, where we hear the story of Jesus and Jairus coming to him, pleading with him, you know, my daughter's dying, and then Jesus stops and he says, no, and there's something here I need to deal with. Jairus' daughter dies, but it's actually, we need to slow down, I think, and change the way we, dare I say, abuse the earth. And he brings in some of the things that are happening, some of the things, particularly the cycle of trees. You know, he says we tick a box when we fly a plane to add a bit to the cost of our ticket, because actually we know that a tree is being planted. The problem is that we're already damaging that cycle. It's not just enough to just plant new trees. The atmosphere, the soil, the surrounding air is not working as it should. the cycle of oxygen and carbon dioxide is not working as it should. The trees, dare I say, are not performing the way they should to keep those things working. So we've got to not just plant trees, but actually, dare I say, plant Jesus in our heart and change the way we live, both for the good of the earth, but also the good of humanity.
Yeah.
Do you want to go down the tree route?
Yeah, we'll kind of jump into the next chapter. So rather than jump back, let's keep going, because Archbishop Stephen does kind of, in chapter 15 has this brief mention, but then in chapter 16, this is really what you're unpacking, his look at the ecological question, the carbon neutral question, the how do we look after the world, how do we acknowledge that what we're doing, and he leads into what is quite a moving section off the back of talking about climate change and ecological stuff, to talk about his interest in trees and how trees have been speaking to him, and he reflects on this kind of idea of this poem that he's trying to write, and how trees are conveying deep truths about human nature to him. And before you think it's weird, it's not. It's kind of I'm making it sound a bit odd, but
it's not, is it?
He talks about the rootedness of trees, and we live in a transient world where there's so much going on, and he writes about how a tree is literally rooted, and trees pay attention to their roots. They're grounded in space and in time, and there's something about, as they are rooted, therefore they have a place and they don't move, and it's just a real testimony against the restlessness of our world. He's writing about this poem that he has been trying to write for years, but he knows the start is good, and the first line of the poem is, "You are extremely good at standing still." And actually, before we go off on a jokey line, there's something so powerful in that, because we are not, as human beings, good at standing still. We're unpacking the story of Moses at the moment, and this Sunday coming, I'm going to preach on the bit where God leads the people through the Red Sea. And it's been speaking to me already. There's this beautiful, and for many people, it's a favourite Bible verse in the Old Testament, where it says, "God fights for you, you need only be still." And so often we are in a rush to solve our own problems, to dive around, and there's something about God calls us as his people to stand still, to trust in him, to know that God's presence is with us. And Archbishop Stephen is saying, trees, you're extremely good at standing still. And he writes then, and I thought this passage, I might just read it because I thought it spoke to me on such a deep level. He's talking about trees are good at standing still. And then he says, but we, on the other hand, as humans, are more fidgety. We find it increasingly difficult to be present. We are always looking over our shoulder. We anxiously fret about the future. We rake over the past. We have almost completely lost the ability to grow and flourish where we are, let alone seek the interior growth that comes from putting down deep roots. We want instant, year-round fruitfulness with grass that only ever surge upwards in one direction. It works for a season, just about, but then it kills us. A life lived in community with God is a rooted life. As I read yesterday, I just had to stop for a moment and think, you have beautifully summarised what I see in the world around me. An anxiousness, a fretting, a worrying about the past, an obsession with the mistakes of the past, an inability to grow and flourish in the present because we're so worried about trying to set goals for the future. What does it mean to just be rooted in something that doesn't move, where the goalposts don't move? What does it mean to be confident in who we are, that we're not just trying to improve ourselves or develop something? To look at a tree and go, you're good at standing still, because I can't do it. As humankind, maybe particularly as millennials, but it's not just a millennial thing. I see it in the older generations too. What does it mean to be rooted where we are? To set down strong roots that isn't just worried about the house for the future, that doesn't just get guilty over what's happened in the past, but is confident and comfortable in saying there are rhythms and seasons. I don't need to be 110% all the time. I don't need to prove my worth every minute of the day. What does it mean to just be content in the now and to trust that God works all things for good? Because as much as we want to laugh about what does it mean to be good at standing still, for all of us, I think that's what we need at the moment. We're all exhausted. We're carrying the weight of a pandemic on our shoulders. We're so busy trying to plan for the future. What does it mean to be content in the now and trust that God will see us through? That verse from Exodus, I'm going to preach on it on Sunday.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be still and trust that God is in it for us? Not worrying about the past, not blaming what happens. That's a spoiler for Sunday, by the way, but I thought this was the most powerful paragraph perhaps of the whole book. That idea of what does it mean to be content? What does it mean to put down roots? What does it mean about this new community where we flourish together? And yeah, I just found it a very, very moving section. I don't know about you, Dave. Do you want to add anything?
And just as you were speaking, I mean, I had a million thoughts going through my head, none of which are in the book. Well, some of them are, but being still is very counterintuitive for dare I say, a world who in the last 18 months have actually been forced to be still, which is interesting, isn't it? That actually we have not been able to branch out, dare I say, to move around. We just, but what you're saying is that we've been still, but we have not been content.
Right.
And that's the issue. Paul says that godliness with contentment is great gain. And I think we've lost that idea of what it means to be content. Not with content with, oh, that will do, but in a positive way, being content with our life, where we are. And if we're not content, then seeking the love of God in us to transform us into that place of contentment. And I think being still is, I mean, I preached on Sunday about slowing down. And Archbishop Stephen talks about that we need to slow down, not just, in our life and not rush around too much and living 24/7. The expectation is that if we want something, we can have it. Not just tomorrow, we can have it now. We can get Deliveroo to deliver us beer while we're having a meeting. We can do that any time of the day. So there is something countercultural about that, but it is needed. And as you were saying that, I mean, all sorts of things are running through my head about our life. And one of the things that I was challenged with early on in my time here is that we want to see lives transformed by the love of Jesus. That, what you said about what is our role, what is as Christians, as clergy, is to point people to Jesus. But the next thing is that once we've done that, is to see their lives transformed by him.
Amen.
Now, how do we do that? Well, we have to stay. We have to be rooted here if we want to do that. If we want to see lives transformed, then we have to be rooted. And that means that we have to be here for more than maybe a little season, short season. So I've been here 9 years in Newham, and I have no desire to move on. And I think now and again, as clergy, we do move around quite a bit. New jobs, new possibilities. What would it mean? What would it mean to be rooted, to see lives transformed and changed? And so that reminded me clearly about rootedness as well, about our rootedness in communities. And if we're pointing people, we're also desiring people to transform their lives as well, and seeing that. Now, not for our benefit, not for, well, that was great, I baptised that person, now look at them. That's not what it's for. It's nice, but it's not for it. So I think there is something about that, about us being rooted as I'm not going to call us church leaders. I'm going to maybe call us Christians who want to see the love of Jesus transform our community. So yeah, as you spoke, all those things came to me.
And just as you were speaking, Dave, that deep rootedness you're talking about, in the sense of, just a couple of months ago you were here at St. Luke's with me, and I was licensed formally as vicar, and Bishop Peter spoke on Ephesians 3:14 and 21, and what Bishop Peter often does when he preaches at a licensing service is pick out some key words and I guess kind of prophetically speaks them into your ministry or calls you to remember these things in your ministry. And one of the words he gave me 2 words, my licensing as vicar here. One was to call people to deep roots in Jesus Christ, to be deeply rooted in the love of God in my ministry, but also in what I call people to as part of St. Luke's Church. And then the other was something different, but we're talking about roots and setting roots, to be rooted in God's words, to be rooted in a place and in a time, and what does that look like is how we reach out in what is a transient world. And just a final comment on trees, unless you want to say something afterwards. Archbishop Stephen then leads to this kind of beautiful end paragraph where he then talks about the cross of Jesus Christ is the tree of life. From the barren emptiness of what seemed like hopeless and empty defeat, flowers are blossoming. And however it feels today as people listening to this conversation, flowers are blossoming. And I think that God makes hope and life out of, all the situations. If life feels hopeless, then today we come to a God who can even bring good when it seems there's no way through it. Again, we'll tap into that on Sunday morning in our next part of Exodus, but actually a God who makes ways where there is no way, a God whose very presence in the wilderness gives us the direction to keep going. And even what looks like defeat, Jesus is crucified, leads to victory, although we've got to be willing to push through what is incredibly difficult at the time. God is still at work, even when it doesn't seem possible. So yeah, a bit of tree chat.
It's great. He then moves on really. I mean, this final chapter that it just summarising actually. Well, it summarises the Christian faith, to be honest, and he talks about love, and what that love looks like. And it is interesting. He used the example of Emperor Constantine, and who was the sort of the first emperor that we have, dare I say, rose-tinted glasses maybe sometimes when we think of him, but who established the Christian faith as the faith, effectively a state faith in the Roman Empire. Killed most of his family to do that. Yeah. But what came out of it, and those reflecting the pagan leaders that are reflecting on that, is that the reason, and it is sort of what are the reasons why are people Christians? Why are they following this God? What is it about? What is it about them that other people are following them as well? What is it about it? And it was simply the way they love each other.
Yeah.
But also not the way they love each other, but the way they love other people who are not like them, and love those who actually want to go out to hurt them.
Yeah.
And that is surely, in all of this that we've spoken of, the desire, I think, for us, that God works in our hearts, but also in the hearts of others, is to hold on to those core, dare I say, commandments. Is to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love our neighbour as ourselves. And I think that's certainly what I got from that last part of the thing. Actually, is all leading up to is just creating communities of love. Now, dare I say, the problem is the word love is used and misused and misunderstood. Yeah. But we have the example of the greatest love, and that is of God for us. And so I picked out those things in the final chapter, and there are other things in there, but I just wanted to hold on to the idea of love. And he says, he dreams dreams. What if we could dream what the world would look like? If we could dream what heaven on earth, dare I say, could look like? What would it be? And at the core of it would be a community of love.
Yeah, yeah.
Where do you want to go, Amy?
No, I think that's a good way to finish, because I guess that's ultimately where the book comes back to. That God, right back at the start, he talks about, and he returns it slightly about the women at Paddington Station, and why is he a Christian? Why is he a priest? And the whole book is his explanation of what it means, I guess, to be a Christian in the new way of the world. The women talked in that initial conversation about she'd only ever come across two types of Christians. One's whose faith was like a hobby and it was something they did but without any passion or zeal. And then the second group were people who were so into their faith they scared everyone else away. And so throughout the book, Archbishop Stephen has been offering a third way of being a Christian, one where we take heart, where we have hope, but we also change the world. And it's all about this word of love, isn't it? Sharing the love of God with others, love, and because of a changed relationship with God, changing the way we then live in this world, not as self-interested, egomaniac people, but as people who care. We've said it so many times already in our conversation about common good and welfare of all and wholeness of being, but also inviting people into that. What does it mean to be rooted in Christ? What does it mean to know his love? But also, what does it mean to transform the world by offering a new way of living to the world? So yeah, I don't really have anything else to add. You know, it's good we finished by talking about the love of God that he offers to all of us, whatever our stories look like. Dave, do you want to pray for us as we finish?
Yeah, let's do that. Lord, as we come to the end of this book, may we be still, knowing your presence, knowing your love. May this not be the end of something, but the beginning of something new. As God says in Isaiah, I'm doing a new thing. And we've spoken of the new things that maybe need to happen. A new desire to reach out, a new desire like the tree to be rooted into communities, to seek the love of God, not just for us and our family and our friends and our church, but for the whole of the community that we serve. May we do a new thing in that love. And as the letter finishes, may our life begin. Give thanks for this opportunity to hear the words of Archbishop Stephen. We give thanks for his life, for his love, for his service. And we pray for him in his ministry in York, but also within the Church of England. But for now, our prayer is one, to be rooted in the love of God, to know his love for us, and to love one another the same. Lord, we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Well, thanks, Dave, for praying, for sharing your reflections. Probably worth saying we're going to take a little break from these conversations over the summer months. It's coming up to the school holidays. We don't really have time to read another book before summer kicks in. So we're going to pause Tuesday conversations for a little while, watch the space. We'll see after summer what it looks like. But I just want to thank you for all of our books thus far. I hope it's been helpful for those listening in as we've discussed and unpacked where we see God at work. And yeah, anything you want to add?
No, you've said it. It's going to be a nice summer, hopefully, and we'll see you in the autumn.
Perfect.
Right.
Well, hopefully see you before that, Dave. But we'll be back with Tuesday conversations.
Yeah, for Tuesdays. Yeah. All right. Take care. God bless.
Bye now.
Bye.